It's a shock to start with. It's hard to process, really. I'm quite laid back and chilled out about most things. So it doesn't faze me, but it's always in the back of my mind of what if this happens in a few years' time, and I've now not got myself to try and look after. I've got a wife that's supportive. I've got my kids that don't know anything about this because they're too young still. So it's things like that I've got to process. Yeah, it's difficult. I don't know. It's hard to put into words, really.
What is MND? MND stands for motor neurone disease. About 5,000 people in the UK have MND at any one time. Motor neurons are nerves in your brain and spinal cord that carry messages to your muscles telling them what to do. The term MND covers a group of similar conditions that affect these nerve cells, which can lead to loss of movement, weakness, and muscle wasting. Early signs of the disease might include mild weakness, clumsiness, tripping over, or slurred speech. But each individual experiences the disease in a different way. There is currently no cure, and MND is life-shortening. This is James Smith. In June last year, James was diagnosed with MND. Since then, he has created a fundraising page to help cover the cost of adaptations to his home. He regularly shares updates of his progress and family life through Instagram and TikTok. I met James and asked him about the story of his diagnosis and his journey so far.
My mum's mum, she unfortunately had it and died within about 18 months of having it, unfortunately. And ironically, in the process of finding that out, her brother had it. So in my mind, I'm thinking, I've been drawn the short straw here and I've got the genetic form of what's happened. But I've had, again, genetic tests and I've not had one. My diagnosis hasn't come from a genetic form of the disease. I've just had it sporadically start. So really, up until I've started the fundraising, I've been in a bit of a denial and just sort of carried on going as much as I can. Luckily, I've got a slow progression in the type of MND that I've got, apparently. So I'm fairly lucky in that respect. But now we're realising that, what happens in another year time or 2 years time? I need this, that and the other done. And I sort of thought, well, maybe I need to do a bit of fundraising.
This year, James began fundraising through GoFundMe. Due to his condition, James has had to quit the job he loved as a barber because of weakness in his arms and muscles. The fundraiser is to make adaptations to his terrace house in Bournemouth. Eventually, James will need his house to become wheelchair accessible. I asked James about what help he could get from the government or council for adapting his home.
In terms of what the government can do, I'm now finding that being a homeowner is actually it's impeding me to get a lot of help that maybe someone that was in rented or a council-owned property could get. I was only on the phone to Citizens Advice the other day, and they went through like a questionnaire to see what I'm eligible for. And it turns out that I'm only really eligible for a reduction in council tax. You know, I'm in a standard 2 up, 2 down terraced house that is no way adapted for someone in a wheelchair, and I'd need to look into it a bit more, but the charity through the MND Association, the amount of money that I probably need to spend to get the house adapted rather than having to move is a lot more than I think that they'd be able to actually support me with. So again, that's why I've then created a fundraiser to help put money towards what I need to get done. So it's not just as simple as, all right, well, I'll move. I've got other things to worry about now. I've got my kids to think about and their schooling, and so it's difficult. Yeah, it is difficult.
To James and his family, their house is their home and they don't want to move. But with a lack of funding seemingly available, a fundraiser has become James's only option. I decided to take a look at what finances might be available to James and his family. So I've taken a look through all the available resources on gov.uk, and it's so confusing. I've got about 20 tabs open trying to make sense of this. Basically, the funding that's available from the government comes in a few main forms. First of all, you are eligible for a universal credit if you're unable to work. However, this is means tested, so it is affected if you have more than £16,000 in your savings, which in James's case, as he's worked all his life, could quite be possible. So that's universal credit out of the question. Now, there is a personal independence payment, or PIP, which isn't means tested, and that's between £61.85 and £92.40 per week. That's not affected by your income, but you only qualify for it if you need help with eating, drinking, preparing food, washing, bathing and using the toilet, dressing and undressing and things like that. So it's tested based on your level of disability. Then you've got the Employment and Support Allowance, or ESA. This can give you about £117.60 per week. However, that money can be affected by how much you put into a private pension. So if you've been working over a long time, that can end up being affected as well. Last of all, you have the disability premium. That's not affected by anything. If you're eligible for any of the others, you may be eligible for the disability premium. That's £36.20 a week, which gives you a total of about £274.40 a week if you qualify for ESA. So when you look at the picture, there's not an awful lot that is available if you become disabled having had income before. And when we look at industry analysts in energy predicting that bills are going to go up to $3,244 per year, or even today that's been predicted to rise to $3,600, that money's really not going to stretch very far. So this is going to put people in a lot of tough situations, and there's really not a lot of money available.
People with MND can also receive grants from the MND Association. These grants are specific and can help fund holidays or days out for the family. Currently, through all the schemes available to him, James only receives £600 a month, which in uncertain economic times just isn't enough.
In terms of monetary value, the total amount maximum is about £600. When you consider how much the cost of living has gone up just in the last 12 months, £600 is, I'm grateful for it, but if I'm quite fortunate that the house I live in, we've been in for so long, like I said last time, we've got a relatively sort of average to small mortgage payment per month. But if I was having to rent somewhere to tap into any additional funds or help that I could get through the government that we spoke about last time, an average house is over £1,000, if not more, a month. So that £600 doesn't stretch a lot. In terms of any other help that I get monetary wise is purely through the Christchurch Hospital, which is sort of the Macmillan unit, and they work alongside the MND Association to tap into a pot of money that I can only assume has come from the government, or it's come from fundraising and things like that through sponsors and charity events.
Most of the funds and assistance James does receive are through the MNDA and the Macmillan ward in Christchurch Hospital. Both of these are charities who work closely with people suffering with MND. I met Helen Mackey, who works with the MNDA. In 2021, the MNDA, along with other partner charities, lobbied the government to provide more money for MND support. I asked Helen about their campaign.
So the MND Association, in coalition with MND Scotland and My Name is Doddy Foundation, have been working for over 2 years on a campaign called United to End MND. And this has been our loudest voice that we've ever managed to kind of muster as an MND community, and we've gone to the government and we've said, with their help, with some financial support, with some government funding for the first time, we will be able to provide more hope to the MND community. And what we've asked for is £50 million to be delivered over 5 years, that will enable us to create a virtual research institute. So it's asking for money into the research so that we can better understand the disease, so that we can find an effective treatment and ultimately get us closer to that cure. And when you speak to MND researchers, this isn't moonshot, this isn't, we are at that point of better understanding the disease. And so the 50 million that we've asked for from the government is to expedite, is to kind of rush forward what we know we can achieve. It's just to get those ideas quicker, because ultimately MND isn't untreatable, it's just underfunded. We got the news that the government has supported that campaign in November last year, and hopefully with the 50 million being delivered to the association, we'll be able to change what it means to be diagnosed with motor neuron disease. We know where to look, it's just getting the money to enable us to do that. And clinical trials are extremely expensive, so having that government funding means that we'll be able to kind of fund more clinical trials that will hopefully, and hope is the biggest word that we have in the MND community at the moment, it will give us those answers that we so all desperately deserve.
So yeah, just taking one day at a time and concentrating. Someone once said to me, concentrate on what you can do, not what you can't do. So that's what I'm doing.